Welcome back. In the previous video, we were able to create our reducers, right, as that. So in this video, we are going to trigger an action inside our component and then display the state inside our component. All right, I want to handle everything inside my app.js file. So here, how can we dispatch an action? So here we have a hook called use dispatch from React Redux. Use dispatch. Use dispatch is a hook that helps us to dispatch an action from our component, and I have imported from React Redux as that. All right, and next, before I can dispatch any action, I need my actions, right? So inside my counter slice, we have three actions: increment, decrement, and increase amount. So let me require all these actions here. So here, increment, auto import, decrement, like that, and the last one will be what will be the increase amount. All right, so now I have all my actions here. So next, let's display the state from our store into our component, and also we need another hook called use selector from React Redux. So we'll also have the auto import as that. So we use selector to select piece of state from our store and display it inside our component, and use dispatch is used to dispatch an action inside our component. Okay, so before that, let's try to display the state in our store. So here, to do that, we make use of the selector. So let me call this one counter, and then I assign to the hook use selector, and this take a cover function like that. And in here, I have access to all my states, and then I can return my state as that. And on that, we have a value, right? So before that, let's return a state like that. And then let's console log the counter and see the kind of state we have. So there we go, counter. All right, so let's go back to our application. So inside our console, let me refresh the application, and then you see that we have what? A counter being what? Value of 0. So now we have access to our state inside our component. So what you can do is that I can grab all the counter, right? So here it will be what? Dot counter. I'm using the question mark because I want to avoid using AND operator. So this is equally same as if there is state and state.value. All right, but it's a better way of doing this, a shorthand, by using what? The AND operator. So dot counter. All right, so now let's go back to our console and see what we have. Now we have value of what? Being 0 as that, right? Good. Oh, sorry, yeah, 0. Okay, so now we can display that. So let's have one h2 here and call this one counter, and we can display the value as what? Counter dot value. So let's see what we have is 0. All right, so now let's try to dispatch an action. So let's have 3 buttons here with on style, and then the first one will be increment. Let's copy that and paste. This one will be decrement, and then increase amount. Okay, so now let's see what we have. We have this increment, decrement, and increase amount. So when you trigger this function, it should increase this counter, right? So all what we need is that let's create an instance of our use selector here as a hook. So const use dispatch. So let me call this one dispatch, and it's equal to use dispatch, and that's all what we need. So inside our counter app, our button, let's add on click. When the user click on this button, I want to trigger I want to dispatch my action. So I'll call my function dispatch and then pass in my action. So as that. So with this, if you try to click on this one, what you get is what? Increasing the counter, right? Because inside our counter reducer slices, we have that it should what? Increase by 1. And because of email, I can mutate the state directly, and that's awesome. And the same thing applies to what? Decrement. So the same thing. So let's go to our store, our app, and inside this, let me copy the whole of this one. Okay, let me start from scratch. So I pass in on click, and then like that, and then I pass in my what? Increment as that. All right, so let's try that one too. When I decrease it 17, so let me refresh it. Oh, it's increasing. Sorry, decrement. Let me decrease it. So decrement action. So let's see what we have. There we go, increment. Now, how can we pass a payload to our actions? Even though this is all what we need to create an action, right? Just assign a variable and then you pass your action type. So if you click on this, let's click on increment and go back to our dev extension 2. You can see that the actions are being called here. We see that our actions are being called, so that the string you pass in becomes your action type, as we see it here. Okay, so the next thing is, if you call a function, then you pass in any value, that value automatically becomes what? Your payload, right? So here inside our app, the only difference we are going to pass will be our increase amount. So let's copy the whole of these ones because they should be the same, and then let's change the action called increase amount, and here let's pass in a value of 20. So 20 becomes what? Your payload. So if you click on that, if you will save it, and then let's refresh the application and let's click on increment, increase by 20. You see it's adding, but it's not increasing again. So let's go back to payload, our action type here. All right, so here we want to append plus 20 because as soon as we add, we say 20, it stopped. So what you can do is that we can say state.value and then plus action.payload, right? So no, not this one. It's going to be the all right. So the next thing is, let's try to call our increase amount function action, and then we pass in a payload. Okay, so let's copy these ones as well because it's going to be the same, and then as that, but let me change the action type to increase amount. All right, so whatever I pass in here becomes my payload. So let me pass in 20 here, and then 20 becomes my payload. So as you can guess, if I click on increase, you're going to increase by what? 20, and that's all, right? But if I want to increase by 20 anytime I click on this button, I have to make changes to my counter slice action here. So here, what I'm doing is that I'm adding my case of increase amount, and then I assigned the value to the value, my payload to my value. All right, so here, if I want to increase by 20 anytime I click, to be plus equal to that, and with this in place, when I click on, let me refresh it, and then as we see, I have that, and now this becomes what? My payload. So whatever I pass in there becomes my payload. All right, accessible inside my slice. Okay, so now let's go back to the actions. Let me show you where we can get your action type. All right, so now this is what your action type, and to be able to prove that's an action type, let's assign to let me call this one action is equal to the increment action, like that. And if you console.log the action, and let's see, you're going to have what? This increment counter. So let's go back to our friend, and then let's refresh the application. And what do you see? I have my action of type called increment and /counter. Okay, and if you want to know the payload, so if you pass in any value inside your action, it becomes your payload, right? So here, let's pass in something like 10 here, and if you save it and then let's refresh the application, and what do I see? I have my value being what? 10 here. So first it has my action type and then payload. So the payloads are passed to automatically behind the scene for us, right? So this all what we need to know about increment, create action, and create reducer. So first we have used what called builder notation. The next video we are going to use what is called map notation.